Rahul, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here, Raj. So good afternoon, everyone. As Raj said, Samagra, we are a mission-driven governance consulting firm, and we bring about a lot of transformations, end-to-end transformations across governments, state, national, betting on the capability of what's open source, open standards, open ecosystems. And we've had a lot of learnings along the way. I want to take a lens of the gig economy, of the people involved in gig economy, and give you a bunch of examples of what goes around the scenes. I also want to give you a whole bunch of tools. I'm a technologist, so I will give you a bunch of open source tools and constructs that you could probably use readily in your applications. Pull up any survey, right? Pull up any survey across the web, and you see the whole gig economy really coming of age. A large majority of the workforce soon may actually turn part of the gig economy. What that means is you have a white-collar worker, a blue-collar worker, pure digital worker. All of them are working for a time, for a price, and that dynamically generated. Now, everyone as part of this economy has a lot of questions. What do these questions mean? Hey, do I need to get married to one platform? Can I participate in another platform? How do I get paid? What's my career growth? How do I give proof that I have actually worked at so-and-so? So a whole bunch of questions around trust, around mobility, around credentials. All of these are part of people who are working in the gig economy. Now, when it comes to our work in states, we're dealing with the same people. When we're doing skills and employment in Haryana, we're talking about people who need employment. When we're talking about educators, we're talking about people who are on contract, who are full-time employees, who also need to go school by school. Everything is turning dynamic. You heard Pramod talk about everything is moving from static to dynamic, right? So think of a village agriculture worker in Odisha trying to figure out which farm to visit next to make his decisions. Every one of these tasks, whether it is a mentor in the school, whether it's a farmer or a village agriculture worker, things are turned into a bite-sized task that they need to act on. What that also means is how you attack these problems in terms of knowing what proof exists. So, for example, we're working with Uttar Pradesh, with the health regulator. And then there you need to figure out what's paramedical staff like. A ward boy there, a ward boy in a hospital asks, hey, how do I become an X-ray technician? If I take a course in MRI technician, can I actually get a job abroad? So a whole bunch of these questions around gig economy are the same questions that every government, every public, private sector, companies and organizations are grappling with. The way we are addressing this, as I said, we bet on open source, using open source, contributing to open source. Second is betting on open standards, helping create them, of course, follow them, evangelize them. And thirdly, building open ecosystems, thanks to Beacon. So let's start with open source. We all know all of these digital public goods in India. You take Aadhaar, or its equivalent MOSIP. You take CoWIN with DIVOC, with vaccination certificates. Not just 2 billion people in India, but an equal amount in other countries. You take UPI, you take GEM. I don't know how many of you know, the GEM's marketplace is one of the largest commerce marketplace in the country. $47 billion worth of transactions. UPI has crossed $3 trillion worth of transactions. What does that mean is all of these things, one takeaway is all of these things were built using open source. That's why they were built so fast. These things don't appear as magic. If you start building them from scratch, writing lines of code, line by line, this would take decades to build. Just in the last 10 years, just look what India has done. Now, if you take that and apply it to some of the things that we've been doing, I want to give you some examples from the ground. So just 2 weeks ago, we launched a ChatGPT-based interface for farmers that answers farmers' queries in Odia. While there is a whole bunch of things to talk about the ChatGPT part, and we had to train it with knowledge data that the government had created over the last 10 years, there's a lot of hallucinations that need to be taken care of ChatGPT. So that thing aside, what I want to focus on is the real magic for the farmers happened because we had that actually in Odia. Now, how do you get Odia to English? ChatGPT is English, right? In just 2 days, we were able to make English Odia. And that's thanks to Bhashini. How many of you have heard of Bhashini? Bhashini is an open source platform launched by the Indian government, by our beloved Prime Minister, maintained by the IIT Madras, started by brilliant folks at Ekstep, that enables an open platform for anyone to contribute. It's called Bhasha Dan, contribute language data, create models for it, contribute those models back, and then use those as APIs or as models directly in your application. That's how, just within a couple of days, we're able to get this whole thing working in ODIA, input and output. Similarly, when it comes to Open Data Kit, in Open Data Kit, this is something that's been there for 10 to 12 years. Tens of millions of folks use Open Data Kit the globe over. Open Data Kit is something that we use across data collection apps in all of our programs. Data collection apps range from monitoring teacher data, assessment data, and so on. All of these workers using Open Data Kit based products, 20 of them working across 4 states seamlessly. What that means is, when a district officer in Himachal Pradesh wants to change certain things of the app, wants to change the workflow, wants to change certain questions in there, he does not go back to the engineering team saying, hey, let me build it again, and let me take another 6 months and money to build it. They just go in, configure it themselves. That is the power of being open here. When we're talking about registries for professionals across the board, you talk about gig economy, you talk about these things, you finally need a source of truth for people in the system. In this case, in Uttar Pradesh, you're talking about source of truth of people who are paramedical experts, who are nurses, who are doctors. How do you have those registries? That is built off something called Sunbird RC, Sunbird Registry and Credentials. That is what powers most of the registries in India that you see there. Again, open source for you to use. Similarly, we're actually contributing to digital public goods. So Prashnavali allows for crowdsourced question banks to be created. We contributed there because that enabled it to be launched in Haryana, but because it was contributed to a digital public good, Sunbird for Ed, it got launched nationally, part of Diksha, and then when we were in Uttar Pradesh, we were using the same thing with zero effort. That's the magic of digital public goods. Similarly, Diksha, the WhatsApp bot that gets powered by Diksha, called Diksha Tara bot, the underlying infrastructure of how do you create bots, that part is called Sunbird UCI that we built and contributed back to Sunbird. So both ways, right, using and contributing back is key in this game. Other part I want to stress on is trust built on open standards. So when it comes to open standards, you talk about healthcare professionals, and when we are talking to these, we talk about, I mentioned the importance of proof of experience. So that is one of the standards that we're all together working on as volunteers. How do you define proof of experience? How do you verify that somebody actually gave it? So a chief resident doctor saying, yes, I have trained this ward boy on X-rays, gives him that credential. How does that credential come about? That is a proof of experience credential, again issued by someone. Again, Sunbird RC. Report cards, Kathakali dance teachers, report cards from school, Kathakali dance teachers, tuition teachers should be able to give you badges, should be able to give you digitally verifiable certificates like your vaccine certificate. That's exactly what we're making happen in Uttar Pradesh with schools. So there are an N number of things. We've talked about DEPA in the morning, Digital Empowerment Protection Architecture. That's the exact thing that we're using for farmers in Odisha. How do they share their personal data such that they get enabled credit? So any of these things build trust in the system. It's not just about trust, but also interoperability. So when we had to launch an oral reading fluency test, part of Nipun Lakshya assessment app in Uttar Pradesh, we wanted to tie up with private players who are also doing that. So in this case, we tied up with Google. Now, Google is a private player, right? The government doesn't want to share data with Google. Neither Google wants to see that data. How do you build these anonymous boundaries and yet let things interoperate? This, we use something called a SOFI spec. which enables deep linking across apps. Same thing for Himachal. When the government app looks up something, transfers it to another app and takes control. Same thing you saw in the Beacon Experience Center today morning. So this enablement of transferring seamlessly, keeping the same experience for the end user, but transferring across different building blocks is what a lot of standards enables. Lastly, just want to touch on open ecosystems. We've talked now enough about open ecosystems in terms of what they are. I want to give you 3 examples before we close. One is students' app worksheets. What are we tied to only one platform? You know, if I want to access worksheets, a student may go to Byju, then he only sees Byju. A student may go to Khan Academy, only sees Khan Academy. What we're trying to enable with some of the projects that we're launching is enable any student to access any worksheet from Diksha, from Khan Academy, from any app, or similarly courses. And that's exactly what's called Beacon for Digital Skilling and Education Protocol. That's DSCP. Similarly, there's Beacon for Agriculture that is being created. There's Beacon for Credit with Open being created. Each of these things in every domain. And if you are in a different domain, I'd encourage you to just talk to Beacon, talk to the team, and create your own standard, get volunteers, and create that, formalize that as a bigger standard that the ecosystem can use. So overall, join the movement. I think open source, open standards, and open ecosystems are here to stay, and we really need to do our little bit for the entire public-private sector to actually jump on this bandwagon. Thank you very much.